Welcome back to Sir Nightshade. In this episode, I'm sharing 6 true, disturbing stories from the Appalachian Mountains. Ever seen a red cloth appear by your tent when you didn't put it there? Or wondered why a fire tower isn't as safe as it looks, even 30 feet up? Hit that like and subscribe. Share this with your friends, and tell me where you're watching from. Now, let's begin. My name is James, and at 26, I was burned out. Not the kind of tired you feel after a long day at work, but a deeper kind of exhaustion, mental, constant, like my mind was being squeezed by some high-pitched frequency that never stopped. I needed to disconnect completely from the world. I needed a mute button for everything. I wasn't looking for enlightenment or some spiritual healing journey. I just wanted silence. So, I chose the Appalachian Trail. Not the whole legendary thing, just a small loop that would take me about a week. The route started in a tiny North Carolina town called Elk Ridge, wound through Hot Springs, and curved back toward Blinn Hollow. I picked that stretch because it was remote enough that I wouldn't have to see another soul, but still close enough to civilization if things went sideways. I didn't make a big deal out of it. Everything was summed up in a short text to my sister, going off-grid for a few days, and then I turned off my phone. No GPS, no social media. My biggest fear wasn't the wilderness. It was someone trying to reach out and ask if I'd found myself yet. All I wanted was absolute emptiness. The first 3 days were a dream. I was completely immersed in the near-perfect silence of the forest. Everything in nature felt sharper, more defined. I noticed dozens of shades of moss green, felt the rough bark of an old oak against my back. I rediscovered that satisfying kind of fatigue you only get when your body has truly earned it. I followed every survival rule to the letter, from hanging food to keep bears away, to marking emergency points on the map. I had a contingency plan for everything. That discipline was the only thread keeping me grounded in this solitude. I felt completely safe, like I was the master of this quiet kingdom. And then came the 4th night, and everything changed. I camped deep in a valley, a spot I thought was perfect, sheltered by natural windbreaks. I had just sat down, ready for my usual miserable dinner, trying to relax, when something hit me hard. The smell. It hit instantly. A terrible, chemical stench, like a disgusting mix of rust, old blood, and leaking battery acid. Underneath it was something faintly sweet, the sweetness of decay. My whole body went rigid. That was pure biology, an instinctive alarm, danger nearby. I scanned for the source, a dead animal maybe. I searched the brush, checked the slope above me. Nothing. No vultures. No scratch marks, not even a disturbed leaf. The forest was still, too still. I didn't need to look anymore. I packed up fast and zipped the tent shut before the sun was fully gone. I was inside, but that's when the real fear began. A few hours past midnight, while I was drifting in and out of a restless sleep, I woke to the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, watch step, crunching through dry leaves and broken twigs on the forest floor. There was no panic in the rhythm, no random scuffle like an animal's. These were intentional, someone trying to move quietly, but making just enough noise to let me know they were there. I sat up in my sleeping bag, frozen. I didn't dare breathe. The only sound was the pounding of my own heart echoing in my ears. The footsteps began circling the tent, one perfect, lonely loop. I could follow the sound as it crept around, bit by bit, until it stopped, right behind my head. The silence that followed was worse than the footsteps. No voice, no flashlight, just presence. Someone standing inches away from me. Why the circle? Why stop exactly there? My rational mind broke apart. Out here, you can face wild animals, but the idea of an intelligent, malicious intent, that's an entirely different kind of terror. I didn't move. I didn't dare touch the zipper. My hand clutched the survival knife so tight my fingers went numb. That feeling, being watched, being studied in the pitch-black dark, was the longest, coldest moment of my life. All I could do was wait. Wait for the faint gray of dawn, until the first bird calls finally broke the night like a blessing. When daylight came, I checked the ground immediately, and I found the footprints. Not hiking boots. The soles were almost smooth, like old leather shoes. And worse, the toes pointed slightly inward, pressed unnaturally into the soil. That wasn't a natural human gait. It looked forced, distorted, or maybe intentionally disguised. That detail chilled me more than the footsteps themselves. This wasn't just some lunatic. It was something wrong, something mimicking a human, but not quite right. I packed up in a frenzy, skipped breakfast. I just ran. I didn't stop until my legs screamed with pain. Forget the route, forget the plan, none of it mattered anymore. But then I realized something worse. The smell was still with me. It came in waves, faint at times, then strong again. That same sick mix of rust, rot, and that strange, sweet note like overripe fruit. No corpse smell follows you for 10 miles through mountain trails. This wasn't residue. It was alive, persistent. That's when it hit me. I wasn't a hiker anymore. I was prey. The second night, I found a sparse hilltop, thinking the open view might make me safer. I was wrong. I didn't dare start a fire. It would be a beacon in the dark. I crawled into my tent, knife still in hand. Around 2 a.m., I woke again. This time, I heard breathing. Slow, measured, human, coming from just beyond the tree line. Not the panting of someone chasing me, just calm, steady observation. Then, the footsteps returned. Thud, thud. No circling this time. He walked straight toward the tent. In the dim light of the moon, I could see his tall, thin silhouette. He was holding something long, like a pole. He stopped right beside the tent. Didn't say a word. Then he lifted the pole and tapped once. A single knock, polite, almost gentle, but filled with something cold and deliberate. A silent message. I know you're in there. And then he turned and walked away. The stench clung to the fabric of the tent, a silent promise that the hunt wasn't over. After that night, I forgot what sleep even was. The moment the first light of dawn appeared, I grabbed everything I could and ran. I abandoned the main trail and tore down an old maintenance road I'd marked earlier. I walked until my legs went numb, until pain was replaced entirely by raw, consuming fear. By late afternoon, barely able to move, I stumbled upon an old hunting cabin. It was barely standing, 3 walls and half a roof, the wood eaten through by rot. But I threw myself inside, treating it like my last fortress, just to catch my breath. And then I saw it. Right above the doorway, where the fading sunlight hit, were carvings. Dozens of names etched deep into the wood. Some initials, some full names, each one with a date beside it. My hands trembled as I scanned them. Some were faded and ancient, carved decades ago. Others looked fresh. The most recent name was dated 3 days earlier, and just below that name was a blank space. It wasn't random. It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate, a clean waiting space, waiting for the next entry. My blood froze. Everything, the chemical stench, the deliberate footsteps, the tapping pole, it all connected, a chain of cold realization tightening around me. I wasn't a random victim. I was next. That blank space was meant for my name. I spent the entire night in that half-collapsed cabin, clutching my knife so tightly my fingertips went numb. I didn't sleep. I just listened. Every snapping twig outside convinced me he was back, waiting to finish what he'd started. But he never came. Maybe he didn't need to. Maybe he wanted me to leave on my own, driven out by fear. When daylight finally returned, I bolted down the old road until I saw a ranger's truck. I must have looked like I'd crawled straight out of hell, clothes shredded, eyes wild. The ranger asked if I was okay. I stammered out the only lie I could think of. Saw a bear. Got lost trying to avoid it. He stared at me for a long time, but thankfully didn't press further. When I finally got home, I wasn't the same. I'd found the silence I was looking for, but now it's filled with an alarm that never shuts off. I sold everything. Maps, boots, backpack, water filter. Anything that tied me to the woods, I got rid of it. I never went hiking again, because somewhere, out there on the Appalachian Trail, there's an old cabin, and on one of its rotting walls, there's a space still waiting for my name. I've always considered myself pretty good with the outdoors. I mean, I'm no survival expert or anything, but I know how to camp, I know how to hike, and most importantly, I know how to stay calm. I'm not the kind of guy who jumps at every snapping twig. Maybe it was that confidence, or maybe just the arrogance of youth, that made me say yes without hesitation when my cousin Ben invited me to his family's cabin out in the remote woods of Waverly, Virginia, last August. And I've got to admit, it wasn't your typical vacation cabin. It was big, rough-hewn, and completely isolated. No neighbors, no cell service, not even the faintest glow from a distant town. Behind it, the forest didn't just begin, it loomed. A towering wall of dark timber that seemed to stretch on forever, swallowing sound and light alike. It was the kind of place that made you realize just how fragile you really are once all the safety nets of modern life are stripped away. Ben and I, though technically adults in our 20s, reverted instantly to being kids whenever we were together. Same dumb jokes, same ridiculous snack-eating contests. The first few days passed quietly enough, but boredom set in fast. No Wi-Fi, no distractions, just the same old rounds of Mario Kart until our brains started to melt. That's when Ben threw out an idea. There's an abandoned fire lookout tower at Ridgepoint Bluff, he said casually, like he was suggesting a walk in the park. It's only about 3 miles through the woods. Pretty rotten, but still standing. You can see the whole county from up there. I froze mid-cheesecake bite. He'd been there before. Back in sophomore year, he said. We hiked up at night. Scary as hell, but kind of amazing too. I raised an eyebrow. A night hike through unmarked forest trails? Sounds like a very polite way of saying suicidal. Ben. He just shrugged, that familiar challenge glinting in his grin. Come on, we've done way crazier stuff. I've got headlamps. We can camp on top, cook some noodles, have a good old brotherhood with nature moment. I hesitated, but only for a second. He was right. And more than that, I didn't want to be the coward who turned down what already sounded like the start of a legendary story. We packed up around 8:30 p.m. Ben threw together the basics, cheap sleeping bags, a small stove, a few packs of instant noodles. I brought 2 flashlights, a lighter, some water, and a stainless steel folding knife my uncle had given me. Just feeling the cold weight of that knife in my pocket made me feel a little safer, ready, somehow, for whatever was waiting in the dark. We started the hike just before 9 p.m. The sun had already set, but a faint bluish-purple glow still lingered on the horizon, enough to make out the shapes of things like the trail, as Ben called it, began right past the backyard and immediately dove into a tunnel of thick trees. It wasn't much of a trail at all, narrow, uneven, and overgrown, more like a path made by deer and small animals than by people. I kept ducking under low branches, stepping over thick roots. 5 minutes in, I tripped hard and nearly face-planted. Should have brought shin guards, I muttered. Ben just laughed. Welcome to Mother Nature's gym. After the first 15 minutes, we stopped talking, The forest had a way of silencing you. That's when I realized how addicted I'd become to city noise, because the total quiet out here was overwhelming. No crickets, no frogs, not even the faint whine of mosquitoes, just the crunch of our boots and the occasional brush of leaves when we passed too close. It felt like we were walking underwater, sound muffled, distorted, heavy, like the world itself had been sealed off. Then we passed an old truck, rust-eaten, tilted to one side, leaning against a massive oak like it had been dropped there by a crane. The windshield was shattered, moss spread across the hood, and vines had crawled through the broken grill. Ben nodded toward it. That thing's been here forever. Logging truck, probably busted an axle. Nobody ever bothered to haul it out. We joked that it looked exactly like the opening shot of a horror movie. The camera pans across the wreck. Eerie music swells, and you know someone's about to die. About half an hour later, we found something worse. Something hanging from a tree branch. At first, I thought it was some kind of handmade decoration, but when we got closer, I realized it was bones, small ones, probably from birds or rodents, strung together with frayed twine, mixed with dirty feathers and streaks of red paint smeared across the larger pieces. I froze. What the hell is that? Ben squinted. Locals make those sometimes. Protection charms. Folk ritual stuff. My dad told me about it. Appalachian witchcraft, basically. The thing turned slowly on its string. There was no wind, but it still moved, like something unseen was nudging it, watching us, or worse, guiding us. The deeper we went, the more it felt like we'd stepped somewhere we weren't supposed to be. By the time we saw the fire lookout tower, it was past midnight. It rose above the trees like a rusted skeleton of steel, half collapsed in missing pieces. Thick brush surrounded the base, and the staircase looked anything but safe. Several steps gone completely. Others warped and bent like crushed soda cans. I asked, "You sure this thing isn't going to collapse?" Ben grinned. "Only one way to find out." We climbed, slowly, carefully, gripping the railing with both hands. Some steps groaned under our weight. One gap was so wide I had to jump, my stomach twisting at the drop below. But eventually, we made it. The cabin at the top smelled like mildew and something worse. Maybe a raccoon had been living there. We unrolled our sleeping bags on the open floor, cooked up some instant noodles, and looked out at the sky. The stars were incredible, sharp, endless, almost holy. For a moment, it really did feel magical. Then I heard it, a rustling sound below the tower. Not a squirrel, not a raccoon, something heavier. Ben's flashlight clicked off instantly. "Don't move," he whispered. We froze. Step, pause, step, pause. It was circling the base of the tower, slow, deliberate, human. No voice, no crack of branches, just that steady rhythm, as if it was searching for something. My heartbeat was pounding so loud I was sure it could hear it. I counted the steps, 12, 13, 14, then silence. We stayed that way for what felt like forever, probably 10, maybe 20 minutes, until I finally convinced myself it must have been just another hiker. Or at least, I tried to believe that. At some point, I must have passed out from exhaustion. But when I woke up, a wave of wrongness washed over me, cold, heavy, suffocating. Ben's sleeping bag was empty. The zipper hung open, half undone. "Ben?" I called out softly. No answer. Panic hit me hard, not the kind that freezes you, but the kind that lights a fire under your skin. I crawled to the edge of the platform and aimed my flashlight down. Something was standing at the base of the tower. But it wasn't Ben. It was tall, too tall, gaunt to the point of breaking, its limbs impossibly long and drooping, like it didn't understand how to use its body. Its head tilted at a grotesque angle, not in curiosity, but in dislocation, like its neck had been snapped. The shape of it was wrong in every possible way. And then I heard Ben's voice. It came from the trees, 50, maybe 60 feet away. "Josh, I need help, eh? Too clear, too perfect, too empty." Like a recording being played back by something that didn't understand emotions. "Josh, I need help." The same words, the same tone, exactly the same. I stumbled backward, trembling. My hand found the pocket knife before my brain even realized it. The cold steel vibrated in my palm. The thing below stood still for a second. Then it began to climb, not using the stairs. I realized the staircase had collapsed long ago. It was scaling the metal beams, its joints bending and snapping in ways that defied anatomy. It moved fast, terrifyingly fast, and made no sound at all. I turned, heart hammering, knowing it was already halfway up. And then I heard it again. "Josh!" But this time, I knew. That was Ben's real voice, ragged, desperate, human. The thing froze. Then it dropped. It fell straight down, silent, like a marionette with its strings cut. I rushed to the edge and shone my light. Nothing. It was gone. Seconds later, Ben burst out from the tree line below, pale as death, flashlight shaking wildly. "Run!" he screamed. "We have to go. Forget the stairs." I didn't think. I just jumped. I grabbed a support beam, swung out, and let go. The ground slammed into me hard, pain shooting through my legs. But Ben was there, pulling me up before I could even breathe. We ran. No words, no thoughts. Just blind, primal terror. Branches tore at our faces, roots caught our feet. But we didn't stop. Not until the cabin appeared through the thinning trees. Ben slammed the door shut behind us, locked it, and collapsed. Only then did he tell me what he saw. Something had been moving beneath the tower. It moved wrong, jerky, disjointed, like it didn't understand how bodies worked. Then it vanished, and a moment later, it started speaking, with his voice. We packed our things and left Waverly that very morning. Never looked back. But even now, I can still hear it sometimes, the heavy footsteps circling the tower, and Ben's voice, perfect and hollow, calling my name from the dark. My name is Jamie. I'm 24, and the story I'm about to tell you began with the most unremarkable decision imaginable. A solo hiking trip through the Blue Hollow Mountains, along the Tennessee-Georgia border. Sounds adventurous, right? It wasn't. I wasn't chasing enlightenment. I wasn't answering some call of the wild. And I definitely wasn't running from my inner demons. I was running from the silence that followed getting fired. It was one of those soul-sucking office jobs where the highlight of your day is watching the coffee machine clog. I got tired of small talk, of pretending everything was fine. So, I grabbed my backpack and disappeared from the city. My gear was nothing special. Some dried food for a few days, a tent, a cheap burner phone for emergencies, a GPS unit that looked like it belonged in a museum, and a hand-drawn paper map that had probably seen better decades. My favorite part? The forest had no cell service. For the first time in years, I was completely cut off from the noise of the world. The first night was perfect. I set up my hammock near a stream. The sound of running water, a soft lullaby. I cooked instant noodles, the saddest meal known to man, and listened to nature's symphony, frogs chirping shitiershi, branches cracking under small feet, the kind of sounds that remind you the world is alive. I wasn't afraid. In fact, for the first time ever, silence didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. The next morning, I kept moving. About 6 miles in, I noticed a narrow path veering left, half consumed by vines and wild growth. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe something deeper, but I took it. The trail led me into a denser part of the forest, where the trees grew so close together the sunlight could only drip through in fractured beams. The air was heavy, unmoving, like time itself had stopped here. And then I saw it. A collapsed cabin, half swallowed by the earth. The roof had caved in. The doorway rotted to a jagged black hole. Next to a rusted old stove, half buried in damp soil, was a Polaroid photograph. I brushed the dirt off carefully. It showed a shirtless man standing right in front of this same cabin. The picture had faded, but his face, right in the center, was disturbingly sharp. His eyes weren't looking at the camera. They weren't looking at anything. They were empty, expressionless, like he'd been frozen mid-breath. I flipped the photo over. No date, no name, just blank white. A chill crawled up my spine. Not fear exactly, but the sense that I had stumbled into something private, something that was never meant to be found. I snapped a quick picture of the cabin with my phone, slipped the Polaroid into my pocket, and left. By late afternoon, I found a small clearing on a hill, about 50 yards from the cabin, and decided to camp there. I picked it for one reason. The thick canopy completely blocked the view of where the cabin stood. I told myself one comforting lie before I fell asleep. If I can't see it, it can't see me. That night, falling asleep felt like a battle I couldn't win. Not because of noise, but because of the absolute, suffocating silence pressing in on me. It was the kind of forest stillness that makes you realize how alone you really are. The kind where you start listening to your own heartbeat and breathing, just to prove you still exist. Around 2 a.m., I jolted awake like something had shocked me. My eyes flew open, heart pounding, with that eerie sense that I had heard a loud sound, but couldn't remember what it was. I stayed perfectly still in my hammock, muscles locked, listening. Then, I felt movement. Not the wind. It was a deliberate push, something, or someone, brushing past and shoving the hammock just hard enough to make it sway once and stop. Too heavy, too intentional. I didn't move. Slowly, I reached for my flashlight, my palms slick with cold sweat, and flicked it on. Nothing, no motion, no shadow. Just the beam, cutting through thick black air and bouncing off tree trunks. I waited, trying to rationalize, but the silence felt wrong. Then I heard it, the crack of a branch somewhere down the slope. The sound of weight, shifting through dry leaves, not close, but not far. Another snap, then nothing. I sat up, my whisper sounding pathetic in the vast emptiness. Hello? No answer. My ears strained so hard it hurt. And then, a short, dry cough, like someone clearing their throat, trying not to be noticed. It came from the direction of that damned cabin. The sound was unmistakably human, but it didn't belong here. My blood went ice cold. I froze in my hammock, too afraid to move, waiting for dawn. When the light finally came, the first thing I did was check the ground around me. And that's when I saw it. A footprint, bare, clear as day, less than 3 feet from where I slept. The print was large, the toes wide and spread. No sign of shoes. Just a clean, deliberate impression, like whoever made it had stood there quietly for a long time before walking away. Panic settled into my stomach like a block of ice. I didn't eat. I didn't even think. I just packed my gear and started following the map back toward the main trail. A few miles in, the forest started to feel wrong. No birds, no insects, no rustling leaves, just my own footsteps echoing like I was the only living thing left. That's when I began to notice the carvings. At first, they were just deep slashes into the bark. Then they grew stranger, more deliberate. Symbols. A spiral inside a square. A cross bent at unnatural angles. 7, maybe 8 trees, each marked differently. Too intentional to be vandalism, too old to be a prank. They looked like warnings. And then I saw the face. It was carved into the trunk of a massive oak, long oval eyes, and a warped, sagging mouth. The detail was unsettlingly precise. I reached for my phone to take a photo, proof, I told myself, and the moment I lifted it, I saw him, standing just behind the next tree. Completely still, shirtless, skin pale and waxy, almost translucent. The tree hid half of him, but I could see the face clearly, the same empty, lifeless face from the Polaroid. He didn't blink. He didn't flinch. He just looked at me, as if he'd been waiting patiently for that exact moment. I don't remember turning to run. One second I was staring at him, the next, I was sprinting, pure, primal panic taking over. I dove behind a fallen log, crouched low, and waited. Nothing. No chase. No footsteps. Just that same, dreadful silence. After what felt like 15 endless minutes, I started moving again, avoiding the trail entirely. I cut west, using my compass, praying to find a road or any sign of civilization. Around noon, I stumbled into a clearing and found another cabin. This one looked newer, solid roof, smoke trailing lazily from behind. Animal hides hung on a line, tools scattered across a rough wooden table. Despite every instinct screaming, "Run!" I crept closer, hugging the tree line. That's when the smell hit me. Burned meat, thick, greasy, with a metallic tang that clung to my throat. A metal drum sat near the porch. I inched toward it and peeked inside. Bones, big ones, twisted, misshapen, not deer, not bear. Something about the proportions made my stomach twist. I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet, just as I heard the cabin door creak open behind me. I didn't wait to see who or what came out. I ran through a dry creek bed, clawed my way up the slope by tree roots, and didn't stop until I reached the top. When I finally looked back, there was nothing. No movement, just silence. That silence was the worst sound of all. I kept walking until night fell again, forcing my body past exhaustion, both physical and mental. I knew I couldn't risk setting up the hammock anymore. He knew where I was. That's when I found the hunting stand. It was bolted into the trunk of a massive tree, maybe 30 feet up. I didn't care how high it was. It was the only vertical safety I had left. I climbed faster than my drained body should have allowed, adrenaline screaming through my veins. The platform was barely big enough to sit curled up, but I wrapped myself in my jacket and stared into the motionless dark below. Around midnight, I heard it, footsteps, slow, heavy, one step at a time, crunching through dry leaves, getting closer, closer. I gripped the rusted railing, trying to steady my breath. Then a voice, calm, cold, like someone reading names off a list, emotionless but intimate, in a way that made my blood run cold. Jamie. Then again, Jamie. That was when I knew it was him. The man from the photograph, the pale ghost among the trees. The ladder creaked, one rung at a time. Something was climbing up. I grabbed my small knife. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold it. The blade's chill bit into my skin. When the figure reached the top, I didn't wait to see his face. I didn't wait for those hollow eyes to meet mine. I kicked out, every muscle fueled by pure panic. My boot slammed into his chest with a wet, heavy thud. He fell backward. A dull crash. Then silence. No scream, no groan, just the dead weight of something hitting the ground. I didn't hesitate. I jumped off the back of the stand. My ankle twisted badly when I landed. The pain was sharp, electric, but I ignored it. Pain meant I was still alive. Pain was better than what was waiting, and I crawled, then limped for hours through the dark forest. No direction. Just one instinct. Keep moving. Keep distance from the thing behind me. Finally, I saw headlights. A truck rolling slowly down a dirt road, sound and light. The raw pulse of civilization. I didn't think. I ran straight into the openness. The driver slammed the brakes, jumped out, shouting. I collapsed by the front bumper. The dirt road felt like the softest bed in the world. He asked if someone was chasing me. I nodded, gasping for air, unable to form words. I never told him about the cabin, or the symbols, or the photograph. No one would believe me, and saying it out loud felt like giving it power. The next morning, safe and far from the Blue Hollow Range, I did the last thing I could. I took the Polaroid out of my pocket. I didn't dare look at it, afraid that even seeing his face again might call him back. I crumpled it, set it on fire, and watched as the pale image of the man and the ruined cabin curled into black ash. That day, I realized something. True horror isn't a scream in the dark. It's the unblinking stare of something that has already decided you're its prey. And the worst truth of all, sometimes, there are things in the woods looking for more than just lost hikers. Have you ever had to run away from your own family, only to find yourself running straight into the arms of something far worse? Today, we'll tell the story of Mason, a boy who went searching for peace, and instead found unspeakable horror waiting in the dark. The summer I turned 17. Everything inside our tiny house seemed to explode. It was the kind of family tension you could taste, bitter and metallic in the air. My parents turned every conversation into a battleground, no matter the topic: money, dirty dishes, or something as stupid as who forgot to buy toothpaste. Everything was a reason to yell, the kind of yelling that made the windows tremble. I became a ghost in my own home. After school, I'd sit in the car at the end of the driveway, waiting for the shouting to stop. But it never did. It just changed tones, from rage to despair, and back again, over and over. It all came to a head one night after a fight worse than usual. My dad threw a wooden chair at the wall. The sound of splintering wood and falling plaster was the final, hollow breaking point. From the fragile safety of my locked bedroom, I texted my mom. Just a few words. I need to get out of here. Anywhere. She didn't ask a single question. Her reply came instantly. Okay, be safe. The emptiness in that message said everything about how hopeless she'd become. My only option was Uncle Travis. He had a cabin off the grid, tucked deep in the hills near Franklin, West Virginia. No map showed it. No GPS could find it. I'd been there once as a kid. It was boring back then. But right now, boring and quiet sounded like the paradise I'd been desperate to find. Travis wasn't a warm man. He was a block of gray stone. He picked me up at the bus stop without a word, chewing sunflower seeds and spitting the shells into an old Gatorade bottle. When we reached the cabin, it looked smaller and more isolated than I remembered. The wood siding had faded to a hopeless gray, and the screen door hung crooked, tapping out a lonely clack, clack, every time the wind passed through. The place had 2 small rooms and a bathroom. The air smelled of old coffee, damp wood, and the smoke of a dying fire. I noticed a heavy, chipped ceramic dog bowl sitting by the sink, but there was no dog. Had a mutt years ago, Travis muttered when he saw me looking. It's dead. The bowl stays. He dropped my backpack by the wall and looked at me with eyes completely devoid of warmth. Then he gave me the rules, his voice low and commanding. Listen close, kid. Don't follow the carved trees. Don't stay out after dark. And never, ever go west. I waited for a smirk, a joke, a reason. He gave me none. He turned away, lit a cigarette, and that was the end of the conversation. I'd come here searching for peace. but all I felt was a quiet, growing fear of the unspoken rules this wilderness demanded. The next few days passed in restless wandering. The forest was oppressively dense, the hills rolling endlessly, until I completely lost my sense of direction. It didn't feel like a natural forest. It felt like a maze built to keep you trapped. Sometimes I'd stop and really listen, but there were no familiar sounds of nature. No birds, no squirrels, no buzzing insects, not even the faint rustle of dry leaves. It was an unnatural, suffocating silence, as if someone had muted the entire world, and somehow that deep absence of sound was more terrifying than any growl could ever be. It was too quiet to be safe. Then I started noticing the bones. At first they were small, easy to dismiss, a bird's rib cage, a rabbit's skull. But then came larger ones, raccoons, maybe, their rib cages laid bare. They were always dry, perfectly clean, as if something had carefully stripped the flesh away and then arranged them right beside the path. After a while, I forced myself to stop looking too closely. But the carvings haunted me more than the bones ever could. On random trees, symbols had been carved deep into the bark. They weren't the careless scratches of teenagers, but strange, deliberate markings, ancient-looking triangles stacked over each other, web-like lines, and perfect circles within circles. One carving on an old oak made my blood run cold. 2 stick figures holding hands, but their heads replaced with harshly crossed-out X's. Some of the more disturbing carvings were surrounded by black handprints, child-sized, pressed into the bark, dark and permanent. But the thing that truly broke my mind was this: they moved. I saw a clear symbol on one tree, but when I came back the next day, it was gone, or worse. It had appeared on another tree I could have sworn was clean the day before. I finally brought it up one evening over burnt eggs and toast that Travis had either ruined on purpose or didn't care to save. "What do those carvings mean?" I asked, voice tight. He didn't even look up. He just muttered, his tone making my blood freeze. "Don't touch. Don't follow. Don't ask again." That was the only full sentence, and the last warning I ever got from him. One morning, before dawn, I woke up drenched in cold fear and couldn't go back to sleep. I decided to walk farther than usual. I packed some jerky and a flashlight into my backpack and set out down a narrow trail I had never noticed before. It wound between 2 massive dead trees, pale and brittle, as if they'd been burned from the inside out. The trail curved unnaturally, trying to lead me in circles, but never quite managing to. And then, suddenly, the oppressive woods opened into a wide clearing. In the center was a perfect circle of stones. They weren't random, each one spaced evenly, forming a round boundary about 20 feet across. Inside the circle, there was nothing. No leaves, no grass, no insects, just dry, lifeless dirt. And right in the middle stood a tree stump, pale, smooth, freshly cut, with no bark and no jagged edges. It looked wrong, like it didn't belong to this forest at all. I stepped closer, peering over the edge of the circle, careful not to cross it. That's when I saw the rope. It hung from a tall, dead branch, old, frayed, thick, tied into a crude noose. It wasn't swinging wildly, just a slow, deliberate sway, like someone had touched it moments ago. I told myself it was the wind, but there was no wind, only the smothering silence. I spun around, heart pounding, and someone was standing there. He was maybe 10 feet away, completely still, barefoot. His skin stretched tight across his face like dried leather. His shirt was stained dark at the collar and chest, his ribs jutting out like something from a horror prop. But his eyes, they were the worst part. Pale, unblinking, wide open. He wasn't breathing. "How did you know?" I gasped between breaths, collapsing onto the cabin steps, pain radiating through every limb. Travis didn't answer. He just gave a short nod and kept his shotgun aimed toward the black tree line. The rest of that evening passed in suffocating silence. Not a word between us. Travis sat outside on the porch through the night, the quiet guardian. I curled up on the torn sofa inside, staring into the dim glow of the stove, feeling how thin the cabin walls really were, a fragile skin separating me from whatever waited out there in the dark. Around 1 a.m., the silence broke, not with a scream, but with footsteps. They weren't close at first, just out beyond the far edge of the trees. Long, deliberate steps, slow, unhurried. I could hear leaves crunching, branches snapping, not randomly, but purposefully, as if each sound was meant to announce its presence. It was the rhythm of a hunter who already knew its prey had nowhere left to run. The footsteps circled the cabin once, and then stopped, right beneath my window. And then, a voice. "Mason," it whispered, softly. I froze. It was my mother's voice. The same tone she used when asking me to grab something from the car. Calm, familiar, human. "Mason, help me. I'm lost." Every nerve in my body screamed to move, to open the window, to look, to help her. My mother, the person I'd left behind to escape the chaos, now out there, needing me. I took a step towards the glass, trembling, when Travis's hand shot through the cracked door and clamped around my wrist. The grip was iron, rushing, wordless. He shook his head once. His eyes, filled with raw, silent terror, begged me not to move. "Please," the voice whimpered. "Mason, I need you." The sound stretched, warped, the pitch sinking lower, dragging itself through distortion like a waterlogged recording being played through a broken speaker. The familiar voice twisted, hollowed, until it became something else entirely. Something pretending. I opened my mouth to scream, but Travis covered it with his free hand. We sat there, paralyzed in the dark, while the thing outside circled the cabin again and again, whispering, coaxing, mimicking. It didn't stop until dawn. When the first gray light crept across the window, the voice vanished. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Outside, the evidence was waiting. Bare footprints, toes splayed wide as if gripping the soil, circled the entire cabin. They stopped directly beneath my window, and then just ended. No trail leading away, no hint of where it had gone. It had simply ceased to exist. I packed my things that afternoon. No words were exchanged. The air between us carried the weight of something both of us now understood, but would never name. Travis drove me to the bus station. We didn't speak the whole ride. Just before I stepped off, he looked at me with exhausted relief. "You're lucky, kid," he said quietly. Then he drove away. I never told my parents what really happened. I said I got homesick, and they didn't ask questions. 10 years have passed. Life looks normal again. But the cabin, the shifting symbols, the sniffer in the clearing, and that voice pretending to be my mother, they've never left me. They linger like frostbite memories that never fully heal. I know what I stepped into that day, a place where the veil between our world and something ancient, something hungry, is paper thin. The creature pointed at the pale stump where the noose hung. Was it a threat or a hint of the price paid for stepping into the wrong circle? Even now, I still check the ground outside my house sometimes, just to make sure there are no bare footprints, toes splayed wide in the grass. Because some darkness doesn't stay buried in the wilderness. It waits, patiently, for you to bring it home. The pure horror of isolation is what makes real stories like Mason's so chilling. What would you have done? Could you resist that familiar voice calling from the dark? Let us know in the comments. What do you think the carvings meant? And what was the sniffer? A twisted guardian? or something far worse? If Mason's encounter with that unblinking, breathing figure chilled you to the bone, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true horror stories from the forgotten edges of the world. I have a habit I can't quite kick. Nearly every weekend, I go hiking alone. There's a kind of stillness out there that's hard to describe, a peace people often mistake for emptiness. But for those who wander deep enough, that stillness has teeth, and the secrets the forest keeps are never eager to let go. For me, the remote trails behind Bell Ridge Hollow, West Virginia, have always been sacred ground. A hidden corner of earth, wild, silent, untouched by the noise of civilization. I parked by the old metal gate, the clatter of rusty chains echoing that familiar, sharp sound, then hoisted my pack and set off. The day started pleasantly enough, cool, with a soft breeze that chased away the last traces of spring heat. About 2 hours in, the logging road split. What was strange was how deliberate the new path looked, as if it had been freshly cleared for some specific purpose. I took the right fork, and that wrong choice changed everything. I saw it. A cairn, one of those stacks of stones hikers sometimes make, stood about waist high. The rocks were arranged with disturbing precision, so carefully balanced it felt unnatural. At the top, right at the center, sat a shard of broken red glass, flat and gleaming, like a dead eye staring straight up at the sky. I circled it, trying to find logic in its presence. It wasn't a trail marker, not a sign, just that eerie glass pupil, glaring with silent anger. I shivered, forced the thought aside, and kept moving. Half an hour later, I found another cairn, identical. But this one was different. Sap was running down one side, thick and slow, catching the light like syrupy tears. It looked like the stones were weeping. The sight rooted me in place. I shoved the word supernatural into a far corner of my mind and told myself it was just coincidence. Branches rustled above. I scanned the trees, suddenly certain someone was watching. Then something I still can't explain happened. I glanced at my GPS. Frozen. The screen showed my location from 30 minutes earlier. The signal was fine, full bars, no glitch, but it wouldn't move, as if something was deliberately holding me in the past. I rebooted it, and it worked again. But the forest wasn't the same anymore. Everything felt tense. Every snapping twig sounded too close. Even when the wind died, the trees creaked. The calm had turned oppressive, charged, warning me something was coming. I zipped my jacket and picked up my pace. Not long after, I came across the third cairn. No red glass this time. Instead, someone had tied a strip of old flannel around the base, a faded red and blue pattern. It looked exactly like the miners' shirts I'd seen in black and white photos from Bell Ridge back in the 30s. When I crouched to touch it, crack! A dry branch snapped behind me, sharp and sudden like a gunshot. I spun around. Nothing. My heart hammered in my chest. I didn't need to check my watch to know it was around 2:15 p.m. That dead hour of the day when everything feels suspended. I stuffed my tracker back into my pocket. The plan had been to reach the ridge, but the forest had other intentions. It had drawn a new path for me, one that led straight down into hell. Just as I passed a cluster of old oaks, the ground suddenly lost its firmness. My foot slipped, and I tumbled down into a shallow valley that didn't exist on any map. The feeling was awful, wet, heavy, as if a storm had poured only here while the rest of the trail stayed bone dry. I felt displaced, unnaturally pulled into a pocket of space that shouldn't be there. I stumbled downward, following faint deer tracks, those silent, instinctive paths. But the deeper I went, the stranger everything became. The air thickened, heavy and sluggish, as though it were struggling to breathe. Moss clung to the stones in thick patches, like diseased skin. Stranger still, some of the rocks seemed carved. They had sharp, deliberate angles, too clean, too intentional to be natural erosion. It suggested order, purpose, in a place that should have belonged entirely to nature. I tried to convince myself it was just odd geology until I saw it, a cabin. I've come across abandoned ones before, but this was different. The roof was coated in a layer of dark soot, so dense it looked like it had been smoldering for decades. The windows were so filthy they no longer reflected light. They were like black mirrors at midnight. No glass, just hardened grime. No smoke from the chimney. No sound. No life. But what froze me were the footprints. A pair of them, deep in the mud, right before the door. You could almost see the curve of the arch. Someone, or something, had been here very recently. I wish I'd turned around then. That was my last chance. But curiosity, that sick pull toward understanding what I'd stumbled into, dragged me closer. I crept around to the back. In a patch of wet earth, someone had planted crude wooden crosses. 7, maybe 9. I couldn't be sure. Each was just a sharpened stake with a messy pile of rocks at its base. And the sap. That same shimmering sap I'd seen dripping down the second cairn, slow and glistening, was oozing from a few of the crosses, still wet. And the red glass, shards identical to the first cairn, were buried around each cross, half sunk into the soil in a disturbing pattern. It looked ritualistic. I wish I could erase that image from my mind. Then things got worse. A dog, or at least that's what I thought at first. It stood maybe 15 paces away. It looked like a sculpture carved from dark wood, all edges and shadows. But I swear it moved. It took one deliberate step and lifted its head. Its legs were too thin, too long, like a dog drawn by someone who'd never actually seen one. A jagged, unnatural sketch brought to life. Its muzzle was stiff, and its eyes, unblinking, locked onto mine. I froze. My blood pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I swear it tilted its head, just slightly, as if curious about the thing frozen before it. And then, without a sound, not a bark, not a rustle, it turned and slipped back into the trees, leaving nothing behind. I didn't think. I ran. Every direction was chaos. Trees and rocks blurred into a spinning maze. I ran blindly, driven by pure, animal panic, until I saw it, the first cairn again. The exact same spot. The forest, impossibly, had led me back. But the top stone was gone. In its place was a ring of human teeth, arranged in a perfect circle, some large, some small, all polished to a bone-white sheen, as if someone had scrubbed them clean. The shock hurt. That kind of primal violation, seeing something that wrong, snapped something inside me. I shut my eyes and vomited into the leaves. I screamed into the forest, but it wasn't a cry for help. It was the sound of my sanity breaking. I ran harder. My lungs felt ready to burst. My legs screamed in pain. But the image of those teeth, that desecration, was the cruel fuel that kept me moving. My GPS was completely dead. The screen, blank and cold, mocking my desperation. I fumbled through my pack, hands shaking, pulled out my phone, and tried to call emergency services. It shut off after a single failed ring. No signal. Battery dead. At that point, I didn't care about technology anymore. I just ran, downhill, trusting my instincts and gravity, never stopping until the pain in my chest became unbearable and my legs gave out. Eventually, I crashed through a wall of brush and stumbled back to the logging gate. The relief hit me instantly, violently, like I'd just escaped hell itself. But it didn't last. There was a tree stump nearby. On top of it sat a pair of boots. My hiking boots, not the pair I was wearing, but identical. Brand new, spotless, empty. Inside each one was a small pool of clear water. I couldn't comprehend it. It hadn't rained. Why were they there, placed so neatly, filled with clean water? And then, something else. A Polaroid photo, half tucked inside the left boot. My hands trembled so badly that I spilled some of the water just trying to steady myself. Slowly, I pulled the photo out. My blood froze. It was me, sitting in that dry creek bed, eating lunch, shot from behind. The exact spot I'd been a few hours earlier. The frame was tight, focused on me. No sound of a shutter. No rustle from the brush. No warning glance from the corner of my eye. Whoever or whatever had taken it had been standing just a few yards away, silently watching me. The idea of being observed, hunted, photographed, it felt more invasive than even the image of those teeth. I dropped the photo and bolted for my car. My car was still at the gate. I threw the door open and jumped in. But even inside that steel box, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still walking, still running. I jammed the key into the ignition, missed twice before the engine finally roared to life. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I just slammed it into gear and tore down the gravel road, rocks clattering behind me like gunfire. 10 miles later, I pulled into a roadside diner. I sat at the counter, staring at the cup of coffee they set in front of me. My hands shook so badly, the mug rattled against the saucer. The waitress asked if I was okay. All I could manage was a whisper. "I need a ride." I didn't say another word. Not about the teeth, not about the cabin, not about that twisted, impossible dog. That night, paranoia devoured me. I scrubbed everything, my clothes, my backpack, even the shoes on my feet, until the washer and dryer screamed in protest. I double-locked every door, left the lights on, and sealed the curtains tight. I couldn't sleep. I only drifted in and out, my eyes fixed on the front door, waiting for proof I was wrong, waiting for someone or something to peer through the darkness. 2 days later, the second photo arrived in the mail. Same creek bed, but closer this time. My face, my shirt, my pack, all centered perfectly in frame. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, composed. A message. I didn't open it. I just stared at the envelope, already knowing the horror that waited inside. That was the last straw. I packed that night. 2 weeks later, I sold my place near Bell Ridge Hollow and moved away. Now, I only hike marked trails in public parks, around people. And if I ever see a cairn that isn't a trail marker, I turn back immediately. I don't slow down, because sometimes the scariest thing about the woods isn't what's hiding in them, it's what's watching you, following you, even after you've escaped. It all started in a forgotten corner of the internet, the kind of place you'd never expect to find anything real. I stumbled upon a messy, unhinged post buried deep in an old hiking forum under a thread about abandoned trails. It was a rambling wall of text, frantic and almost punctuation-free, talking about a supposed cave system somewhere near the Tennessee-North Carolina border. The post gave no coordinates, no useful information, just a few grainy photos of a rusted chain-link fence, overgrown with vines, tucked behind what the poster called an old ranger outpost. But it was the final line, the cold, quiet sentence at the very end, that lodged itself in my mind. It simply read, "Turn back if you hear the clicking. Don't keep going. I'm serious. That line wasn't just a warning. It was a hook. It haunted me. At first, I saved it out of idle curiosity. But as the weeks went by, it started to pull at me. I couldn't shake the thought that maybe, buried beneath the rambling madness, there was a sliver of truth. Curiosity turned into obsession. By June, when I had a week off from work, I gave in. Curiosity won. I packed my gear, flashlight, knife, rope, sleeping bag, and began the 6-hour drive deep into the mountains. I set up camp near an overgrown trailhead where my cell signal instantly vanished. No bars, no maps. Just me and the trees. The next morning, I followed the strange landmarks mentioned in the post. 2 birch trees split like collarbones, a creek fork, and a horseshoe bend on a ridge. And then I saw it. Crow Hill Outpost, nearly swallowed by the forest. Its roof sagged, its door hung crooked. A rotting wooden sign leaned against the wall, confirming the name. A name I'd never seen on any official map. Behind the outpost, past moss-covered rocks, I found the fence. It was twisted, rusted, torn open near the ground, as if something had forced its way through. I followed suit, crawling under the gap, stepping onto a trail so faint it might as well not have existed. For 40 minutes I climbed, and in all that time, I didn't hear a single sound of life. No birds, no insects. The forest had been drained of sound, consumed by a suffocating silence. Only the crunch of dry leaves beneath my boots and the weight of my own breathing kept me company. The isolation was bone deep. Finally, the ridge narrowed, and I saw it, a jagged crack in the rock face, yawning black and uneven. I had to turn sideways, holding my breath and hugging my pack tight, just to squeeze through. Inside, the air turned immediately cold, sharp and wet, thick with a mineral taste I could almost chew. I flicked on my flashlight and tied one end of my rope to a rock near the entrance, a basic exploration rule. But here, it felt like a lifeline. The passage twisted downward, narrow and steep, and within a few steps, daylight vanished completely, swallowed by a total, crushing darkness. After about 20 minutes of careful walking, my beam caught a wider chamber ahead, and I froze where I stood. The walls were covered, every inch of them, with carvings. It was as if a nightmare had been etched directly into stone. Spirals, gouges, crude human shapes, but all wrong. The proportions were warped, arms stretched too long, heads missing or bulbous and featureless. One figure in particular made my stomach drop. Its spindly arms extended toward a smaller one, as if performing a ritual or devouring it. This wasn't art. And it wasn't history. It was a record, a desperate attempt to capture a terror words could never hold. The air grew heavier. The silence itself pressed down on me. I pulled out my phone, raised it to take a picture, proof that what I was seeing was real. And just then, my headlamp began to flicker. I tapped the side. The light steadied. But that single moment shattered the suffocating stillness. I turned, deciding to leave right then. That's when I heard it. A sharp, distinct sound echoed faintly from the tunnel behind me. Click, click, click. It wasn't dripping water. It had rhythm, precise, deliberate, like something walking and counting. I froze. 3 seconds. The longest 3 seconds of my life. Then, slowly, I began to back toward the entrance, one hand gripping the guide rope. I raised my spare flashlight, aiming it down the black corridor. The rope jerked. A violent, sudden tug, something pulling it hard from the other end. I let go instantly. The rope fell limp, rattling against the stone. The clicking stopped. I stood there, gasping, listening. Silence. Then, movement. Low to the ground. Fast. A flash of pale skin. Long. Twisted fingers, vanishing behind the corner. That glimpse alone was enough. I turned and ran. No thoughts, no plan, just pure animal panic. My light swung wildly, slamming against the cave walls. I slipped on wet stone, the flashlight flying from my hand, skidding away into the dark, crawling after it. I snatched it up, my trembling fingers barely able to hold on. That's when I realized I wasn't in the same tunnel anymore. I was in a small stone chamber, no way out. And then the clicking started again. Closer this time. Click. 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 It emerged from the dark, crawling, moving on all fours, but the limbs bent the wrong way. The joints reversed. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched thin over a skeletal frame. No eyes, no nose, no face, just smooth flesh, and a single slit running vertically where its mouth should have been. In its hands, 2 black stones. It struck them together. Click, click, click. It stopped, tilting its featureless head as if listening or smelling. The stones fell from its hands. And then it screamed. The sound didn't come from its mouth. It came from everywhere. A shrieking metallic wail that tore through my ears and rattled my bones, as if the cave itself were screaming in eternal agony. My flashlight died. I didn't waste a single second thinking or trying to find the flashlight. I just ran, my hands out in front of me. I slammed into stone walls, clawing through tight gaps, scrambling up steep inclines. The sharp rock tore open my palms. My knees were bruised raw, but the pain didn't matter. All that existed was the desperate primal need to escape that horrible sound. I ran until my lungs burned like fire. After what felt like an endless eternity of blind panic, I saw it, a faint shimmer of daylight above me. I threw myself toward it, forcing my body through the final crack, and collapsed onto the mountainside, gasping, gulping down the cold, thin air like a drowning man breaking the surface. I didn't dare stop. I kept running, down the slope, past the ruined outpost, through the rusted fence, until I reached the trail. I fell beside my car and stayed there, maybe for an hour, shaking uncontrollably, listening, waiting. Every rustle of leaves, every distant sound made me flinch, bracing for that clicking noise to start again. Only when the sun rose high and the mountain returned to its false, peaceful silence did I finally gather the strength to drive. I didn't stop until I was hundreds of miles away. The first thing I did when I got home was look for the original forum post. I searched, dug through caches, archives, used every keyword I could remember. But when I tried to find it, it was gone, deleted, erased completely, as if it had never existed. The catalyst for everything that happened was wiped from the internet. And worse, when I checked maps, local records, forestry databases, Crow Hill Outpost wasn't listed anywhere. No mention of it, no history. It was never built. It never existed. I'd gone searching for a strange warning and a forgotten cave. What I found was a hole in reality, and something that should not exist. Now, all that remains are flashes burned into my memory, that pale skin, those long fingers, the sound of stones striking together, and that scream, still echoing somewhere deep inside my bones whenever the silence grows too heavy. This isn't the end. There are others, darker ones. Subscribe and keep the lights on.